afternoon and welcome to our lunchtime lecture. My name is Natalie Stetson. I'm the executive director here at the Erie Canal Museum. I thank you all so much for choosing to join us today. So the impact of the Erie Canal was immense, socially, economically, and politically. Today, we're going to hear just a little slice of these immense transforming effects in our final lunchtime lecture of the Erie Eats series. The Erie Eats project, in it, we looked at the many ways that the history of food, its creation, transportation, and consumption have intersected with the Erie Canal. We just closed up the physical Erie Eats exhibit as we prepare for our annual gingerbread gallery, which opens up tomorrow, but the virtual version of the Erie Eats exhibit is still available on our website, and we will put the link in the comments for those of you on Zoom. The Erie Eats project is funded in part through the generous support of the Erie Canalway National Heritage Corridor and the William G. Pomeroy Foundation. Through this program and the rest of our lunchtime lectures, our goal was to help keep our audience appreciate the varied and oftentimes messy stories of the Canal Corridor and our state and the important role the Erie Canal plays in our present and our future. Before I hand over the presentation to Derrick Pratt, our educator here at the Erie Canal Museum, I'd like to tell you a little bit about some of the programs we have coming up before the end of the year. You can find the details and register for all of these on our website, eriecanalmuseum.org/events. Next month, we have our final lunchtime lecture of the year, which will feature Chittenango Village historian Charles Albee, who's going to come and give us the talk, Bomb, Barrels, and the Erie Canal. That's on December 16th at noon, and it will look at Frank L. Baum, the author of The Wizard of Oz, and his connection to the Erie Canal. Then on December 3rd, we close out Erie Eats with a bang by hosting best-selling author of the books Salt and Big Oyster, Mark Kurlansky, for an evening webinar discussing his books and the history of those two products and the Erie Canal. And that's 7 p.m. on December 3rd. And then finally, on December 11th, we are partnering with the Scano Great Law of Peace Center to host a virtual conversation with Dr. Joe Stallman. He's the director of the Seneca Iroquois Museum, National Museum, and that's entitled The Erie Canal and the Western Door, examining the Erie Canal's impact on the Haudenosaunee in general and on the Seneca specifically. I hope we will see you at some of those programs, either virtually or in person. But now I will hand things over for the main event to Derrick Pratt, our educator, who's going to talk turkey with you all.
Thank you. Thanks, Natalie. My apologies for the hastily cobbled together intro. I didn't care too much about our speaker today. So, all right, thanks for joining me, as we talk turkey. So, this is a fun one. I've been looking forward to it for about a year now. When I discovered this receipt in our archives, I was just trying to post some stuff on social media. It was Thanksgiving, and I said, hey, we got anything with a turkey on it? And lo and behold, we did. We had two things with turkeys on it. This was the more interesting thing. And I happen to know, had some inside information, the Erie Canal Museum was about to feature food prominently the next year. So I said, great, next November, I'll have a lunchtime lecture all set and ready to go, which Natalie will tell you is usually far more foresight than I give to our lunchtime lecture speakers. But anyway, so let's talk about this article or item. Here it is, ta-da. The receipt, oh, I see it's not showing up well here, but I know you guys. So let's look at this receipt, shall we? So up in the top line says Aurora, Cayuga Lake, November 3rd, 1856. Next line, received by Morgan and Mosher. The following line, here's the fun part. One turkey wild, marked C.C. Charles. Then you've got this little boxed off section, which we believe is says from. Then this next name was difficult to read. We've looked at it a lot in the office here. It's possibly an I.L., I.Q., Osborne, unknown, Aurora. And then we see where the turkey is headed to, which is 138 Pearl Street, New York City. Well, it just says New York, but here in New York, we know what that means. And then finally, which we undertake to forward to as above destinations by express without delay. And then it says collect. So that's the receipt. Pretty boring stuff, undoubtedly, at the time. Pretty mundane stuff. I mean, we get receipts now all the time as well. It's essentially an invoice, more or less. But we can tell a lot. We can learn a lot from this single receipt. This is the fun of, working in museums. We get to look at objects and then tell a ton of different stories from them. And that's what I'm going to do today with this receipt. We can take it and tell so many stories. So we'll kind of go through it almost line by line here. And the first thing, the most frequently used word, I believe, on this document, Aurora. What is Aurora Cayuga Lake? Well, here is an image from Library of Congress from about the time this receipt would have been made in 1856. Aurora, New York is located on the eastern shore of Cayuga Lake. Most people today know it as the location of Wells College. But as we're going to see throughout this, Aurora really was a canal boomtown. And in it, we can see kind of a microcosm of a lot of the larger stories and themes of the Erie Canal. So Aurora, on the banks of Cayuga Lake, was originally the homeland of the Cayuga Nation of the Haudenosaunee. They had a settlement around Aurora before Sullivan's Raid came through in the later stages of the Revolutionary War, which burned this village to the ground in Aurora, and it became part of what were known as the military tracts, which were land given as pensions to Revolutionary War soldiers, who will end up coming to this town and settling on the shores of the lake. And, in case you couldn't tell, the Haudenosaunee were settling there. This was a good place. People could easily tell this was a good place to set up a village. It seemed to have a decent place to keep your boats, good soil, etc. And Aurora starts to thrive in the early days of this American settlement into the Finger Lakes. It's actually going to become a prominent site of education even before Wells College is established. It has the Cayuga Lake Academy, which is actually where Millard Fillmore will go to school in his youth. Some of the staff members here, we just visited the Seward House Museum down in Auburn, and Frances Seward, William Seward's wife, actually went to Aurora for seminary, and she was taught there by Mary Coffin Wright, who became a prominent women's rights advocate. So here we can already see these ideas, which we often talk about flowing down the canal, are already starting to take root in Aurora. But that is all going to become even more, it'll be that, but more so, after this, which we see on the screen, is completed. This is the Cayuga Seneca Canal. So the Erie Canal is built from Albany to Buffalo from 1817 to 1825, almost simultaneously. Actually, before they start building the canal, a private company is formed in Seneca Falls, the Seneca Lock Navigation Company, which is a private company, as I said, forms in 1813, which looks to build locks around the falls at Seneca Falls and also some rapids at Waterloo. And that project is actually going to be completed by 1818. But if you're familiar with the Erie Canal story, there's the Western Inland Lock and Navigation Company, where they kind of build small canals and locks on the side of the Mohawk River. They do the same thing here on the Seneca River. It's not a full-blown canal like they will build here in a second. This is a series of locks just around the falls. But they're going to start making Cayuga Lake an important navigational place. People can much more efficiently get to the lake than up to where it connects with the Oswego River, and then up there to, where is it? Oswego, right? And Lake Ontario. So that project is completed in 1818, and then the state's really focused on building the Erie Canal, which is completed in 1825, and almost immediately, they're going to send an engineer from the Erie Canal project down to connect the Seneca and Cayuga Lakes to the main spine, as we often call it, on the Erie Canal. And that engineer is going to be a man named David Thomas, who I sadly can never find a picture of, but he is a fascinating character. So I want to talk a little about David Thomas. He was born Quaker and remained a Quaker his entire life. In the early 1800s, he would set out with a friend to explore the Great Lakes Basin and then come home and write a description of it, describing the flora and fauna of the region, as well as the Native Americans. And that's going to be a very popular book. It will come to the attention of DeWitt Clinton, who quickly befriends David Thomas, who thinks he's just like the most brilliant guy he's ever met. David Thomas has like no experience with engineering, surveying, or anything. But DeWitt Clinton, when he's governor and he's on the Canal Commission, they need somebody to work on that difficult western end of the Erie Canal. DeWitt Clinton says, I know just the guy for the job, David Thomas. And some people are like, I don't know about this guy. He seems to care a lot more about like flowers and stuff. But nonetheless, hard to argue with the governor. So he's appointed a section engineer for the western section in 1820, which he will do an admirable job with. You know, they finished the Erie Canal, so can't complain there. Then after that's completed, he's offered a few other positions, including helping with the Welland Canal out in Canada, bypassing Niagara Falls and connecting Lake Ontario and Lake Erie. Also offered a position on the Pennsylvania canals, which will start to be dug. But he doesn't want to do that. David Thomas has already started settling in what will become Union Springs, New York, which is right in the Finger Lakes. So New York says, hey, Dave, you're a swell engineer. Want to build a canal connecting the Finger Lakes to the Erie Canal, and he accepts that. And it will take them 3 years to build the first version of the Seneca, or the Cayuga Seneca Canal. After that, David Thomas is going to retire from the canal business. He's going to become one of the kind of foremost horticulturalists in the nation. He's actually going to become sort of like one of the early revolutionaries in this agricultural revolution that's sweeping the canal. One of his neighbors is going to also invent a special steel plow that's going to revolutionize plowing. So that guy's also a Quaker. There's a large Quaker establishment in that area. And as a Quaker, he is also going to be a prominent abolitionist in the region, as will be his second wife, Edna Dean Smith Thomas, who we have evidence of her living in Lockport at one point. Who knows? Maybe that's when they met, when David Thomas was kind of in charge of that section of the Erie Canal. She was a founding member, it appears, of the Lockport Female Anti-Slavery Society. So again, we see these connections to larger ideas and movements here, even in what we now think of as this small village of Aurora, New York. We've seen people like Mary Coffin Wright, We now have people like the Thomases advocating for abolition. And in fact, and remember the name I'm about to say, on February 3rd, 1854, David Thomas is going to write a letter to Congressman Edwin B. Morgan, which he writes, quote, "We were not merely pleased with thy outspoken letter," which was opposing pending pro-slavery legislation, "to the committee in New York. We rejoiced over it. In days past, we were mortified that a native of this country had been false to freedom in approving the Fugitive Slave Act. But now our pride is rekindled," end quote. By the way, the native of this country that he's referring to is Millard Fillmore, who we've already met earlier in this talk. So look at that. Just, it's that weird web that Charlie Kelly's looking at. Proves where the mail's from. Anyway, so what is this canal that's built ultimately? The Cayuga Seneca is a 20-mile long canal that will immediately transform the Finger Lakes, specifically Cayuga and Seneca, but eventually Cayuga Lake, or at the time known as Crooked Lake, will be hooked up as well at Penyan to this larger system. And cities like Ithaca, Geneva, Watkins Glen, Penyan are going to thrive because this new canal is constructed. And next, we're going to look at a company that's part of that economic kind of engine that is the Finger Lakes have become. So, and that company is what we saw on the receipt, the firm of Morgan and Mosher. So here's probably the most prominent member of that family, Edwin Barber Morgan. The Morgans first moved to Aurora in 1800. Christopher Morgan, the father of Edwin here, will move in 1800 from Groton, Connecticut. And Christopher originally moves out to work for the Manhattan Bridge Company. That company is part of the larger Manhattan Company founded by Aaron Burr. If you actually read over in this gallery, it talks about the founding of the Manhattan Company. And their job is to build what will actually be, at that point, the longest bridge in the Western Hemisphere. It will cross Cayuga Lake. Though I've been reading Gouverneur Morris's diaries recently, by the time he reaches it, about a decade after its completion, it's already falling apart and like terrifying to take a carriage over or something. But that's beside the point. That's not Christopher Morgan's problem anymore, because once the bridge is complete, he moves to Aurora, which we just looked at, and will open up a store. Now, the bridge is actually important and kind of what we've talked about with the Seneca Navigation Company. If you know the larger story of the Erie Canal, you might know a guy named Jesse Hawley, who is ruined financially in the early 1800s. He sets up in Seneca Falls and Geneva a grain forwarding business. And that bridge over Cayuga Lake, those little locks around the falls, they're just not cutting it for him. He will go bankrupt, and there he will actually write what are known as the Hercules essays in debtor's prison, calling for an Erie Canal. Anyway, I digress. Christopher moves to Aurora, and then he starts having children. First is the guy pictured on the screen here, Edwin Barber Morgan, who will be born in 1806. E.B. Morgan, as he's usually called, seems to have been a real just go-getter. He starts working at his father's store at the age of 13, and by the age of 21, he has already purchased the store off of his father. Then he starts bringing in his younger brothers into the business. Next is the next oldest brother of the Morgans, Henry, is going to join this Morgan company in 1831. And once he joins, it's going to expand dramatically. Because remember, also 1831, so E.B. purchases the store 1827. The Cayuga Seneca Canal is 1 year away from completion. By 1831, that canal is open and business is booming for the Moshers. They have their store, but they are also using it as a warehouse and a forwarding center for goods. They're also going to invest in a steam flour mill, the ruins of which you can still see today in Aurora, from what I understand. And then they're going to get an even bigger boost when this man arrives in 1832. Anyone know who this is? Anyone in the chat? Okay. It's not Santa or anything. It's Henry Wells. He's going to arrive in Aurora. He's going to be getting a shipment of grain from the Morgans, and it's there that he meets the Morgan brothers. And immediately, these incredibly ambitious, sort of like insanely hardworking men are going to meet each other and become instant friends. They see in like kindred spirits in each other, it appears, and they will become fast friends, quickly become business partners and collaborators. Henry Wells, who had been living, he was from Vermont, he's going to move into Aurora. And that partnership is going to continue to grow as they continue kind of making a number of businesses that sort of, they compete, but they also encourage each other and they form a bunch of partnerships. It was very complicated going through this. Like someone would open up a partnership with like 6 other people, and then like one of them would be, one of the Morgans would be on one of Wells's companies. Wells would be on one of the Morgans companies' boards. Fun stuff. Yeah, and they're making a killing, moving stuff on the Cayuga Seneca Canal, and of course, the larger canal system. Wells is going to found a company. You may have heard of it. It's called American Express, to forward goods. And Henry and EB are eventually going to get involved in that. Barber is going to end up a president of American Express at one point. Wells will also, he is the Wells in Wells Fargo, also shipping stuff. And again, EB is going to be on the board of that. It seems like Henry, especially from the collection that we have, he was the guy who was running kind of the family's operations in Aurora. EB was doing these larger, expanding the businesses to Wells Fargo, American Express, which they have their tentacles all over the country, if you will. But they're not the only game on Cayuga Lake. In nearby Ovid, there's a family called the Shanks, and they're going to become prominent as we go forward in our story. They're running a successful line of canal boats themselves, but there was enough business seemingly for the both of them. They both seem to be thriving for a while. By 1850, things are going great, especially by 1852. That's when Wells Fargo will be founded. EB will be made the president. Also in 1852, EB Morgan would be elected to Congress. That's when David Thomas is going to send him that letter for when he denounced Millard Fillmore and the Fugitive Slave Act. And he'll serve until 1859 in Congress. He will be probably the most notable thing Morgan does in Congress is in 1856. He is one of the Congress people who will pull Preston Brooks off of Charles Sumner as he is being caned on the floor of the United States Senate in one of the most notable incidents as the nation moved closer and closer to the Civil War. It's also going to be, like I said, director of American Express. And in 1844, EB is also going to found the company US Express, which is a southern forwarding company. So American Express and Wells Fargo, they usually focused on the northern areas and the west. EB says, hey, people live in the South too, and they probably need goods forwarded to them. So he founds that company in 1854, which brings us to when the receipt is created. 1856. And that is when a new company will be founded. That is the company on the receipt, Morgan and Mosher. So the receipt we have is from a brand new company. So who's the Mosher? I sadly don't have a picture of him either. That would be Alan Mosher, who was born in Venice Center, which is right outside of Aurora. And he's born in 1825, so he's about a generation younger than the Morgans. Any thoughts on why they might have brought Morgan in? Anyone on Zoom?
Should give Steve Milton credit, did guess if that was Henry.
Oh, yes, good job, Steve. Nice work. Not that I'm aware of. No, I don't believe so. No, I mean, I can't really figure out fully why Mosher did. My guess is that, did you listen to the whole resume that E.B. and Henry Morgan now have? He seems to have been brought in to be their guy on the ground in Aurora, handling this forwarding business, because E.B. Morgan, he's got 12 other companies that are gigantic. Morgan and Mosher are now kind of small potatoes. So Alan's this local guy who they bring in to kind of manage the local trade along with Henry. I should also note that this is a fun anecdote. The Morgans had also started investing in railroads around Cayuga Lake, and E.B. Morgan specifically had his house built right next to the railroad tracks so he could walk out in the morning with a stopwatch and make sure the trains were running on time so that his investments were secure. Anyway, Alan Morgan joins in 1856 to Morgan and Mosher, and they are going to continue to thrive. He seems to kind of have helped them establish, I don't know exactly if it was a monopoly on Cayuga Lake, but in 1861, they will buy up the Shanks in 1861. And from the collection we have, so this is from, the receipt is from a collection of receipts that we have. And if you go through it, they have stuff going all over the country. Not just to every corner of New York, which they do, but we also have stuff going as far away as Terre Haute, Indiana, is being forwarded by this company. So, come on, progress, please. There we go. All of these goods that are in that collection, including this turkey, were transported on the Kate Morgan. It is a steamship named after the daughter of Henry Morgan. Constructed in 1850, it is the first modern passenger steamboat on Cayuga Lake. It would take daily trips from Ithaca and back, from Ithaca, which is at the southern end of the lake, up to the northern point, which is the terminus of the Cayuga Seneca Canal. It would leave Ithaca at about 7 a.m., would reach the Cayuga Bridge, which still existed evidently by this time, and would arrive back at Ithaca at 7 in the evening. So we can already see kind of the transportation revolution really taking effect on Cayuga Lake. They've got steamboats now. I've talked about those railroads E.B. Morgan is looking at. Remember, 30 years before this, you were taking a little bateau that could carry, 10 tons of goods. There wasn't even a canal and a boat to travel 4 miles an hour on. Now by 1850, you've got modern steamboats, and this steamboat will also be important for not just the passengers. Obviously, from the receipts, we see that freight was carried inside the Kate Morgan itself, but the Kate Morgan also would usually, according to accounts, tow with it, a series of 5 to about 12 canal boats would be hooked up to the back of the steamer and brought across the lake. Who knows? Those of you who are familiar with Art Cohen's project on Seneca Lake, they will eventually be moving to Cayuga Lake. Maybe we can find a boat that was lost from the Kate Morgan. And the Kate would do a solid job for about 20 years as the Morgans build their sort of empire off of Cayuga Lake, until it would be replaced by an even bigger and better steamboat, the Frontenac, which was built in 1870. And the Morgan would be laid up in dry dock in Ithaca and decommissioned in 1871. When I read this, I was very excited because I actually have heard of the Frontenac. And it's because I had to give a presentation at Cornell once. This is one of our rare images from Cayuga Lake. There's the Frontenac itself. Not floating well, as you can see. Yes, the poor Frontenac apparently was destroyed by fire in 1905. Fire broke out on it. From what I understand, no one was injured or anything. But yeah, so there's kind of the end of the steamboat trade on Cayuga Lake as well. But the Kate Morgan was not the only boat traveling on the canal. Another, we talked about the Shanks of Ovid. They owned this boat, the H.K. Miller, which is one of the most prominent boats on the lake, apparently, and the Cayuga Seneca Canal. It hauled a great deal of stuff. This is actually a receipt I discovered in our archives, heading up to Oswego, bringing some like a tea kettle and some supplies for making tea, evidently, was heading up. You see the picture of the boat in the top left-hand corner there. I cannot tell for sure if that is the H.K. Morgan. I would guess it's not, and just kind of a generic canal boat, but you get the sense of what the H.K. Miller may have looked like. It's going to be captained by Robert Cadmus of Sheldrake, another community on Cayuga Lake. And here's a fun one. Here is a receipt that the H.K. Miller had of when it picked up some salt right down the road here in Syracuse from the Salt Company of Onondaga. So the H.K. Miller was hauling all sorts of goods in its records, which we actually have like 20 receipts for the H.K. Miller in our collections. I figured 3 receipts was enough for everybody today. But we can see like the really diverse and varied set of goods moving along the canal just from this one boat. Some boats, obviously were specified to carry one thing. There were specific lumber boats, but other boats like the H.K. Miller, they seem to have been, jacks of all trades, carrying all sorts of goods. And the H.K. Miller is going to come under the ownership of the Morgans in a few years, but their boats would have been well familiar with the H.K. Miller when this turkey was moving on the canal. So that's the story of Morgan and Mosher, their boats, the boats of Cayuga and Seneca Lake. But why? What's the deal with this turkey? If you remember, I had said at the beginning of this talk, I found this turkey looking for stuff for Thanksgiving. Then I looked at the actual date, and it was early November. I was like, okay, not really a great time to get your turkey. I mean, apparently this year you did want to get your turkeys nice and early, but most years, especially back in the 1800s, you don't want to keep meat laying around all the way into late Thanksgiving or late November for Thanksgiving. But then I started looking into Thanksgiving. I was like, did Thanksgiving even exist in 1856? It didn't as a national holiday. Lincoln is famous for kind of making Thanksgiving the first national Thanksgiving. However, Thanksgiving had existed as a tradition throughout the Northeast for a while. And it existed in New York, wouldn't you know it, since the Erie Canal existed. Yes, Thanksgiving in New York directly connects to our main man here at the Erie Canal, DeWitt Clinton. So Clinton, elected governor in 1817, starts getting his big ditch dug, and conveniently enough, in early November, he declares this, a proclamation where he declares that the state of New York will be giving thanks, quote, for the manifold blessings conferred upon us at all times by the gracious dispensations of his providence, especially for those so signally and extensively experienced at the present period, in the abundant productions of the earth, in the prevalence of general health, and in the increasing diffusion of lights of religion and knowledge. And here we go, in the successful progress of useful improvements. I'll end it there. He keeps going. But this proclamation, not a coincidence, I would say, that it's going to be the year he declares the first ever Thanksgiving for the state of New York, the year he starts digging his canal. If you think this is just a coincidence, you probably also think that Joe Biden has coincidentally been hanging out by dilapidated bridges in the last few days. This is political theater at its finest. DeWitt Clinton is saying, look at me, aren't I awesome? We should thank God. You should probably thank me too for all the great blessings that are being conferred on New York State. And it's funny, I also found the Onondaga Register 3 years later. People are already starting to complain in the newspapers that New York's celebration was not lining up with any other states in early November. And they complain like we need to change it. But that's not going to really happen until, again, Lincoln makes a national day of Thanksgiving. But here we have it, Thanksgiving here in New York. We can trace its history even back to the Erie Canal. Everything goes back to the Erie Canal here. And maybe, just maybe, that turkey was going to C.C. Charles's lovely Thanksgiving table at 138 Pearl Street, New York. But that leads me to the last bit of this presentation. What don't we know from this receipt so far? What is there still to learn? Who was C.C. Charles? I can't seem to find him really anywhere. Sure, if I dug through some censuses and everything, we might be able to find a C.C. Charles living at 138 Pearl Street in New York. But there are so many more stories to tell, is really my point here, from this receipt. Who was this Osborne guy? What does that word even say on the receipt, you know? But who was that person? He seems to have been, he must have been well known in Aurora, at least. I mean, as the forwarding agent for this major firm in the area. Well, we don't even know. So I talked a lot about canal boats and the Cayuga Seneca Canal. Did this turkey even travel by canal boat? There are other receipts in the collection we have that specifically say the goods were put on a railroad. This is 1856. Rail is starting to replace canal boats. But even if it didn't, we can still tell these fascinating stories about how the canal transformed Aurora. That railroad wouldn't have been in Aurora were it not for the canals to begin with. And finally, was that turkey, did it taste good? Did they have a good Thanksgiving? You know, that's one of the last and probably most important question to the people involved here. Did that turkey make it? So there we go. I have spat a lot of names, dates, business stuff at you folks. Okay, I did my 45 minutes. So Do we have any questions? Zoom. Oh, I forgot. I was going to add this at the end. So why is this important? Why do we need to know about this? Well, our mission here at the Erie Canal Museum involves telling the story of the Erie Canal and its transforming effects on our past, present, and future. And in case you missed it, there are a number of things that are founded in this story. They still have an impact on us today. How many people have American Express? I don't know, do people still use Wells Fargo? Someone must. I mean, I still see them around. We've got these businesses that spring up from the canal. I mean, Aurora's still there. Wells College, still standing, founded by Henry Wells as a school for women. We see these stories like David Thomas fighting for abolition. We met Mary Coffin Wright talking about women's rights. These are still relevant conversations to have today. The Erie Canal, the Cayuga Seneca Canal still exists. When they built the barge canal, that is one of the 3 kind of branch canals that will survive that transition, along with the Champlain and Oswego off of that main stem of the Erie Canal. So the Cayuga Seneca is still thriving today. There's just so much, and we also just see some really interesting, we've met some incredible people who, David Thomas, the Morgans, Alan Mosher, they're all these central New Yorkers who, they didn't really start out with much, but we see that here in central New York, we can be a location of innovation, of forward thinking. I think that's an exciting lesson for us to keep in mind today, that I'm a native of central New York. We often get down on ourselves, but there's so much exciting history here in central New York and so much potential still here in this region and on this canal. So there we go. I will ask it again. Any questions? I see we've got some chats. We've got Steve asking if they, I don't believe they pardoned this turkey. I'm pretty sure he was already dead by the time he reached the boat. All right, any other questions? Well, if not, thanks. You folks have been a great audience. I also forgot to plug, I mentioned the Cayuga, the Cayuga Lake Canal, the Crooked Lake Canal. That is actually going to play an important role in our next lunchtime lecture. So please register for that. We'll hear more about Seneca or Finger Lakes canals. All right, well, if not, I did see we have a Q&A here. Thanks for tuning in. Check out all of I'm also speaking at Willow Rock tonight on beer in the Erie Canal, if anyone wants to see. All right, thank you. Have a good rest of your day.